Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver room is full of talent. It's also full of contracts in need of extending. Why has nothing happened? Also, the future stars of the baseball diamond were on display in Texas last night, and you shouldn't put money on Jim Harbaugh winning NFL Coach of the Year. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more all summer long. FanDuel is giving all customers a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
Well, there aren't a lot of NFL teams more interesting than the Cincinnati Bengals going into training camp with several big storylines. Here to give us the lowdown on it all is James Rapien, one of the co-hosts over at Locked On Bengals. James, let's start off with T. Higgins. Obviously, there was the big report that came out on Sunday that the Bengals and T. Higgins would not reach a long-term contract extension or any kind of deal beyond the franchise tag by the July 15th deadline. Was that a surprise for you, or is this kind of what you expected all along?
It's what I expected. I think it's what the Bengals expected. And more importantly, it's what T has been expecting for months now. And I think really going back to that February decision when the Bengals didn't wait at all and placed the franchise tag on T. Higgins, I think it was right before the combine started. They said, all right, we're tagging you. We're going to handle this. And T kind of knew that he was probably going to play on a one-year deal, that even though he requested a trade, they probably weren't going to trade him. And the odds of them, especially as this wide receiver market has blown up over the past few months and gotten even stronger, the odds of a deal getting done were just less and less likely. So no shock at all that T. Higgins is going to play on the franchise tag this year.
Yeah, and just to look a year in advance now for T. Higgins, likely that he becomes a free agent next year, or is there still a chance that this gets worked out after the franchise tag year?
I think it's interesting because when you look at some of the national reporting around T, it's even going back to last month when he signed the franchise tender, it was kind of based around with the idea that he would be a free agent in March. But if T. Higgins goes out there and has a 1,300-yard season, has 10 touchdowns, has a career year, the Bengals can franchise tag him again for roughly $26 million. And normally you wouldn't do that because the second tag is a lot more expensive than the first. But with the way the wide receiver market is, maybe they would consider it. Maybe they would look at the tag and trade option, which is something they didn't really consider this offseason. So I think there's that. As far as a long-term deal, I still think that that's pretty unlikely. They've had time to do it. It hasn't happened. So I don't think that T. Higgins will be a Bengal on a long-term extension at any point.
Makes perfect sense. So going into training camp here ahead of the 2024 season, the other wide receiver, Jamar Chase, has been the topic of a lot of conversation as well. Where do things stand on a potential extension between the Cincinnati Bengals? I'm so used to Jamar Chase playing in Louisiana that I almost mentioned the New Orleans Saints. The Cincinnati Bengals and Jamar Chase.
Bengals fans are certainly hoping to see Jamar Chase in Louisiana in February.
Yes, yeah, there you go.
Potentially play. So we'll just tie it all together there. They're hoping you're speaking it into existence. But yeah, the T. Higgins factor certainly impacts Jamar Chase because the Bengals know what Jamar is going to command. And it isn't medium dollar or high dollar. It's top dollar. And I think Jamar is going to ask for more than Justin Jefferson. And will he get that? I'm not sure, but it's going to be similar to the Justin Jefferson extension. And so what's interesting to me is if you look at the Vikings, they were comfortable letting Jefferson play out his fourth season. Jefferson was clearly comfortable doing that. And then he signed the extension after his fourth season.
Right.
Will Jamar Chase be comfortable with that? Will the Bengals be willing to do that? That is a big question, but there's no doubt about it. The wide receiver market, Justin Jefferson's at the top of it right now. Jamar Chase wants to be above him, even if it's $1.
Yeah.
Wants to be above his former LSU teammate.
Could be a long time kind of fun rivalry between the two of them to see which contract exceeds the next for the next few years, or at least the foreseeable future. Like we mentioned, the Cincinnati Bengals flush with storylines here going into training camp, going into camp. What is the biggest story? And does it have anything to do with Joe Burrow by any chance?
All eyes on Joe. Yeah. Whether it's his hairstyle, his shoes. No, it is Joe Burrow. And it's, how do they manage him throughout training camp? Will he be full go 50% of the time, 75% of the time? Will he be throwing every single practice? Will they give him rest days? They had a plan in place for the offseason program. Joe said at the end of the offseason program, and I asked him about this, that there was already a plan in place for training camp. Has that changed at all? Will they tweak it at all? I think that will be a storyline that we follow, because, and if I had to guess, and I'm expecting there to be built-in rest days. So how much panic is there when Joe Burrow isn't necessarily throwing in every single practice? I wonder if they'll go that route, but I do have a lean that will be the route that they go when training camp opens later this month.
Stay up to date all year long on the Cincinnati Bengals by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Bengals on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, the future stars of the Diamond were on display last night. But before we get to that, the Orioles head into the All-Star break with a bonkers win over the Yankees. No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, the WNBA, and soon the Olympics, there is plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Mets slugger, well, for now, Pete Alonso is the favorite to win the home run derby this year. FanDuel has Alonso's odds at 3-1 to win. Marcell Ozuna has the second highest odds to win at plus 380, then Gunnar Henderson at plus 430, and Bobby Witt Jr. at 470. Representing the All-Star host team, Adolis Garcia checks in with the odds of 5-1 to win the home run derby. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com to get started and make the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. If you're catching this episode after checking out your favorite Locked On show, don't forget to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. The Baltimore Orioles just stole one from the New York Yankees before they head into the All-Star break.
And Mountcastle hits an 0-2 grounder right to Anthony Volpe. Gold Glove winning shortstop, can go to any base with him loaded. You're like, that's the final out, game over, we're swept. And then Anthony Volpe just completely forgot how to play shortstop. Bobbled it twice, tried to flip it to second, not in time. All of a sudden, run scores and it's 5-4. And you're like, of course the break we got still didn't tie the game, just gave us one extra run. And the spot due up in the order was Anthony Santander's spot, but because Santander had tripled in the eighth, the Orioles had rightfully pinch run with Cedric Mullins. Unfortunately, he didn't score. And then you leave Cedric Mullins in defensively, which makes your defense better in the outfield, holding a one-run lead in the top of the ninth. Those were all the right decisions, but it's the struggling Mullins coming up instead of, one of the Orioles' hotter hitters in Anthony Santander. Just like, of course. And Mullins has a fly ball to left field. Struck it fairly well. Wasn't any kind of lazy fly ball. It had a little bit of juice on it, had an exit velocity 93.2 miles an hour. Like, not a hard hit ball, but still firm-ish contact. And all of a sudden, Alex Verdugo comes in, and then he goes back. And I guess he's been hanging out with Juan Soto a lot. He does the Soto shuffle in left field, falls to the ground, the ball falls to the ground, and a walk-off double for Cedric Mullins. I could not believe what I was watching. It was unfortunate that this was the national game and we didn't get a Kevin Brown call of this moment. It was cool that Ben McDonald was still on the broadcast, but what a break for the O's. Again, it went from the gut punch, just worst loss of the year, it seemed like, after the Rice homer in the top of the ninth to, McDonald said this on the broadcast, maybe the win of the year with that rally against Clay Holmes in the ninth inning.
The Philadelphia Phillies have had the best pitching staff all season long, and they just gave up how many homers to the Oakland A's?
After 18-3, it's a funny game, right? I said in the first game of this series, I didn't like the way they played, Ranger Suarez and all that stuff, and I didn't like it. And it's one game, but every single post-game show, every single postcast is just its own isolated show. It's not a whole season evaluation. Today we might do a little bit more of that, but it's not a whole thing of evaluation. I'm not going to judge one series off one game, So then they come out yesterday, and they handle their business. Their offense is alive and well. You have Tyler Phillips going out there and doing one hell of a job out there starting for the Phils, right? First big league start, right? That's great. Family's on hand. Everything's wonderful. Phillies are hitting home runs. Trey Turner's hitting a home run. Nick Castellanos coming up with a big home run. Everyone, it was great. And they score 11 runs. All right. So I thought today they would, all right, I don't like the idea of a bullpen game, more or less, but they go with it. It works a little bit. And then the wheels just totally came off, and it was terrible. And most of it happened on Michael Mercado's dime. But if you score 18 runs, I'm not going to blame just one pitcher, but oh my goodness gracious, the wheels came off the wagon right before the All-Star break.
And the Giants walk it off against the Twins.
The Giants win as Mikey Yaz blasts one to triple alley. Margot dives and can't get it. Then after Yaz is already standing on third, the Twins throw it away into the Giants dugout, and Yaz scores on the air to walk it off. What a wild one out at Oracle Park. All of this comes on the heels of a Blake Snell perfect game bid that was broken up in the 7th, and more drama in the top of the 9th as Camilo Doval completely broke down and allowed the Twins to tie it up before the Yaz heroics.
The Cleveland Guardians have never selected number 1 overall in the MLB draft until yesterday.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Ellis, Locked On MLB draft expert and co-host of Locked On Guardians, and this is an MLB draft player profile. Let's start with the number 1 player on my board, who also happens to be the number 1 player on the MLB.com board. That is Travis Bazana, the second baseman from Oregon State. Travis Bazana did it all this year for Oregon State. He hit for power. He got on base. He set a multitude of Oregon State records for a program that is well known for producing major league talent. Bazana has the weight of a continent on his shoulders, but he doesn't care. He wants to be the Michael Jordan. He wants to be the Ohtani of Australian baseball, and he has accepted that challenge. And here's a kid, I've never heard the stories I've heard about in terms of work ethic. I don't know if he has any hobbies outside of baseball. It certainly doesn't sound like it. He takes every scrap of data, every bit of time, and finds ways to improve. And he had the largest increase in 90th percentile exit velocity and kind of changed his swing path to allow him to tap into some of that power he got to this year. He is a player who's never going to stop improving, never stop getting better. Second baseman now, I could bet on him being a center field in the future. Just tell him he can't, and he'll show you he can.
It didn't take long for the top pitcher to come off the board, with Chase Burns being selected just 1 pick later by the Cincinnati Reds.
Hello, I'm Jeff Ellis, Locked On MLB draft expert and co-host of Locked On Guardians, and this is an MLB draft player profile. Let's go to the number 3 player on my board, who happens to be the 6th player on the MLB.com board. That is Chase Burns, right-handed pitcher from Wake Forest, formerly of Tennessee. Burns has touched 102. That immediately would get your attention, as well as a guy who's performing well when no pitchers are. It was the year of the hitter, and Burns managed to stand out. The immediate question is going to be, how does he compare to Skeens? He's the guy who's coming a year after Skeens. And in terms of pitch mix, he's close. Like, his fastball isn't quite Skeens. His slider is in the same range. His curveball, like, he has 3 at least plus offerings. And that is enough to make him a potential 1. He has ace potential, but Skeens' command and his ability to control were a full grade level higher. That's why Skeens is kind of head and shoulders above Burns, but don't sleep on Chase Burns. This is a potential front of the rotation star. This is a guy who has 3 pitches that are ready to go. Just a little bit more time, and you could have an ace.
The Pittsburgh Pirates were the first to take a high school player in this year's draft at number 9.
Hello. I'm Jeff Ellis, Locked On MLB draft expert and the co-host of the Locked On Guardians podcast. This is an MLB draft player profile. The number 13 player on my board and the first player in my 3rd tier of talent is Connor Griffin, the outfielder, shortstop, many positions listed, from Jackson Prep High School, committed to LSU. He is number 9, I believe, on the MLB.com board. He's a reclassification, young for the class, 17-year-old player, sky high ceiling. If you're like, why is he not higher? I did some research at one point, and it showed that a college player is not only more likely to be safe, more likely to produce a higher WAR than any high school player taken in the top half of the first round. Griffin has great tools. He could be a star. He could be the best player in this class. If you want a lotto ticket, he's definitely the guy. But the biggest concern is his hit tool, and if there's one thing that also causes a player to struggle or not make it, it's hit tool. He's got everything else in spades. He's a great kid, great effort, great athleticism. He's going to be a fun one to have in your system. High risk, high reward.
And the player that fell the furthest was Trey Savage, who fell all the way to pick number 20, despite being labeled a top 10 selection.
Hello, I'm Jeff Ellis, Locked On MLB Draft expert and the co-host of Locked On Guardians podcast, and this is an MLB Draft player profile. If you told me that Trey Savage, right-handed pitcher from East Carolina University, ends up being the best pitcher in this class, I wouldn't be shocked. He's got great secondary offerings. He has really established himself in that upper tier, just a hair's breadth underneath Smith and Burns, who have slightly better stuff, but may not have as much pitchability as Savage. Savage was extremely successful at a program that has been putting several pitchers into the minors as top prospects, and he just got better every single year. When you're looking at his data, again, it's a player succeeding in a league that, in a NCAA setting that was not conducive to pitching success. He is probably more of a 3 or a 2 than a 1, but he should be a quick-moving pitcher that is going to help your team sooner rather than later. Be excited for Trey Savage, who might end up being the best arm in this year's class.
Stay up to date all year long on the big leagues by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On MLB on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the Locked On NFL coaching rankings just dropped, and you're probably going to disagree unless you're a Chiefs fan. You're wasting your money if you're betting on Los Angeles Chargers head coach Jim Harbaugh to win NFL Coach of the Year. Locked On NFL scouting host Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs explain why.
Call the gaming commission. They're stealing your money if you're betting on Jim Harbaugh to be
riding the hot hand, baby.
What hot hand? What hot hand?
Momentum. The momentum. It's not a hot. I should have said momentum. Riding momentum, right?
Of what?
Of Harbaugh. He always wins.
You're back to square one,
dude. I know what we think of the Chargers,
right?
But maybe that's the reality. Maybe Jim Harbaugh is this godsend. They're going to go win 13 games, win the West.
They'll still kiss his feet. They win 8 games. What an incredible job. He didn't have the talent on the roster. Or then, heaven forbid, they win double-digit games to make the playoffs. Oh, it's unbelievable. Harbaugh. And we like Jim Harbaugh. It's hard to rank him in this hierarchy.
Extremely hard, yeah.
He checks in as a fringe top 10 coach for us both, respectively. Without kind of the recent proof of concept. It's been a decade since he's been in the league. But nevertheless, you mentioned the momentum of him in every place that he's been. It's been successful, and you'd like to think that will continue with the Chargers. I just don't know how much of it's going to happen in year one, let alone Coach of the Year odds-on favorite.
Spoiler, he's number 11 on our list. He gets 3.25 points.
I got to say, I actually disagree with Kyle Krabs on this one. I think Jim Harbaugh might be a great bet for NFL Coach of the Year. He's in a very tough division in the AFC West, and that decade away from the NFL, both of those work in his favor if the Los Angeles Chargers win double-digit games, go on a playoff run, or at least make the playoffs. I think that all works in Jim Harbaugh's advantage, and especially being able to do it with effectively the same team makeup, but with a little bit of adjustment in terms of what you were able to do in one offseason, being able to do it effectively with the same team that another coach, Brandon Staley, wasn't able to get it done with. I think all that goes your way. I mean, look, he's plus 900 on FanDuel right now to be head coach of the year, and that's the favorite. But if you could turn $100 into $900 with a guy that has a talented quarterback, a pretty good defense, a very good offensive line. It looks like that they're kind of building there. We'll have to see what the weapons and wide receivers and everything like that look like. Don't get me wrong. But I mean, a heavy run game with Greg Roman leading the way as your offensive coordinator, with you leading the way as Jim Harbaugh building up the trenches. It just kind of makes sense. If the Chargers surprise a little bit, that's an easy way to turn $10 into 90, $100 into 900. That's not a bad situation to be in if you're looking for a nice bet to get started that you can maybe pay off of by the end of the season. Jim Harbaugh plus 900 right now over at FanDuel, to me, not bad at all, even as the favorite. A Boston Red Sox player hit a ball so hard, it damaged a stadium. It was Rafael Devers. He hits a 2-run home run that broke a seat in deep right field at Fenway Park. It always impresses me when you see those videos of fans in the stands who like catch home run balls, they catch foul balls, they do it barehanded. Sometimes they do it with a baby or a beverage in their hands. Then you see a story like this where a ball gets hit so hard that it literally does damage to a stadium that's more than a century old. It's crazy. Also, maybe they'll replace that seat with something that's actually comfortable. My goodness, just the thought, right? Like those Fenway seats are really uncomfortable. Like seriously. If you're catching this episode after checking out your favorite Locked On podcast, don't forget to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And if you're new to Locked On Sports Today, make sure you subscribe because we're bringing you the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, which MLB team is in the best position to make a playoff run after the All-Star break? So at least until tomorrow, stay Locked On Sports Today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.